Hello second years, welcome to the Nature Nurture debate. This is the evaluation points. You've done the AO1, now we're going to look at the evaluation, and we are here, we are halfway through issues and debates. You have 3 more topics to do, and then we are finished with issues and debates. These are examples of some of the questions you might come across: a 2 marker, a 16 marker. You might be given a stimulus and asked to apply the idea of nature nurture to that stimulus. Okay. So, evaluation for nature, you could talk about Nistrat and Billet, so hopefully you recognise these from the biological approach and the psychopathology from OCD. So Nistrat found that you're 5 times more likely to experience OCD if you had a first-degree relative with OCD, and Billet conducted a meta-analysis, so that's drawing 14, in this case, different studies together, looking at twin studies in OCD. And they found that you were 2 times more likely to have OCD if you were an MZ twin and your twin had OCD, so we're talking about concordance rates there, than if you were a DZ twin. So concordance rates are 2 times higher for those with in MZ twins than they are in DZ twins. And hopefully you can draw that, you can tease that apart. Remember, link it back to nature. Why does it support the concept of nature? Then there are twin studies, so Billet in particular is a twin study, and there are several issues with twin studies, and I would pick 1 or 2 of these to discuss in detail, and again you can do some research and look into it a little bit further. So for a key simple one would be that twin studies are not representative, or twins are not representative of the general population. It's quite unique and unusual to have a twin. They might draw more attention, a different sort of environment. So there might be an environment which all twins experience that people without a twin don't experience in some way. So like I say, attention or having somebody similar to you. The rate of twins in the UK birth rate is very rare. It's 1.5% of all births in the UK are DZ twins, and 0.5% are MZ twins. That's extremely rare, so quite unusual. So therefore not representative. So you can tell me about how the studies aren't representative, and then you must link it back to the impact on that has on nature. So calling into question the arguments that support the nature side of the debate. You might have and I've just touched on. So I've just touched on here, exactly as we said, different experiences as twins. So that both means that twins might have different experiences from the general population, but there's also an argument with MZ twins. There's 2 ways you could go with this. You could talk about what we assume that MZ twins share 100% of their environment and 100% of their DNA, whereas DZ twins 50% of their DNA, 100% of their environment if they're raised together. However, there's 2 arguments. Twins, both MZ and DZ, we're assuming they share 100% of their DNA. Well, they could be treated differently. Just because they live in the same house, they might have different friends, different hobbies, different environments, different subjects at school, different teachers, so their environments will be different. Also, you could argue, again, we're assuming that MZ and DZ twins both share 100% of their environment, but MZ twins look similar, therefore, arguably, are they treated more similarly than DZ twins because they're slightly separate? Therefore, do they have more of a similar and collective experience because they're treated more similarly than DZ twins? I wouldn't try and cram all of those into one evaluation point. Pick 1 or 2 points that you like and you can elaborate. And the really nice thing about this is you've got the for, and then you say however, which is the against. Remember, link it back to the nature debate. Don't just leave it as twin studies aren't very good. Why is it a problem that twin studies aren't very good? Against the idea of nature is, I've picked Bandura with vicarious reinforcement, but you could choose anything that illustrated that. So classical conditioning, operant conditioning, keep it human behaviour, not animal behaviour, because the question will be about the nature-nurture debate in human behaviour. But we found, or Bandura found, that children were more likely to imitate a role model if that role model had received a reward, and therefore the children were vicariously reinforced. Well, that cannot be explained by the concept of nature or the nature debate, because it's something in our environment which is altering our behaviour. Okay, and again, elaborate on that, go into that. You know about Bandura. The next thing that we have, and this goes against both the nature and the nurture debate. So this idea, the biggest problem is this with the idea of the nature versus nurture debate, is that we can tease apart nature and nurture. We can identify this behaviour is influenced by nature, this behaviour is influenced by nurture, and actually it's not that simple for various reasons. And I highly recommend that you do a tiny bit more reading on this. So Google the phrase niche picking, and have a look in the pink-haired girl and the dog book for this. Okay, so it's the idea that people choose environments that complement their genetics. So it's that. So therefore, nature and nurture are very intertwined, and it's extremely difficult to pull them apart. And I've got two examples to illustrate this, because sometimes you could go on. It does mention in the pink-haired girl in a bit more detail there are passive and two other types, so you could be more specific. I'd be very careful about that because it is quite complex, but some of you absolutely are able to understand that complex nature of it, and I would argue have a look at it because it's really interesting. So for example, I've given the example of extraversion, where you might have the genetic vulnerability, propensity. I'm sure it's not a bad thing being an extrovert. The genetics which makes you an extrovert, and then you are, as an extrovert, you are more likely to engage with extroverts that will make you more extroverted as well, and could impact your development. And we call that the gene-environment correlation. So it's nature and nurture working together, and a bit like a snowball effect. So it starts with genes, then there's a bit of environment, then your environment affects your genes, and your genes affect your environment, and they're all balled up together in one, so it's very hard to tease them apart. So that's an issue with the nature-nurture debate as a whole, that actually we can't tease them apart. And you could argue that for nature, for nurture, or for both. So another example would be that a child has an aggressive gene, and therefore seeks out, or not necessarily consciously, but its genes cause it to seek out people who are aggressive. So then its environment and its genetics are aggressive. Well, if you're you could argue that if you're in an aggressive environment, then your brain structure might be altered by that. If we think about somebody continually conducts aggressive acts and ignores empathy, that part of the brain might not develop, or may be impacted and damaged in some way. You might experience brain damage from being in fights. If you were being aggressive, there might be, and again being very stereotypical, but arguably potentially there might be other things in an aggressive environment, such as drug use. So that would all affect your biology and your the nature side of you, which then again would lead to more aggressive acts, which would and seeking out more aggressive behaviours and more aggressive environments. So your environment and your genes are very much intermixed, so it's not possible. And that's the idea of niche picking, that you have genes which then make you more likely to go and seek out niches which match those genes. So niche just means like a little if you've identified your niche, like a little area or a pocket of something that suits you, your niche, something that's yours. Okay, so and this flows really nicely. There's studies to support nature, however there's problems with those studies. There's studies against nature. Is it even worth pulling apart nature and nurture? And then finally the interactionalist approach, which argues that no, that's not the case, and actually we should acknowledge that nature and nurture work together and develop theories that support that concept. And you're familiar with the Diathesis-Stress Model, the idea, or the drip effect or the bucket effect. I would use the phrase Diathesis-Stress Model, but if drip or bucket help you remember it, then use those in your memory, but don't write them in the exam because they might wonder what you're talking about. So the idea that you're born with a genetic propensity towards any behaviour at all, but say the key one was schizophrenia, then you are born more vulnerable to it, but you must have those environmental triggers. So your bucket fills up. It is half full already when you're born because of a genetic propensity. Environmental triggers fill up your bucket, and eventually it overflows and you display schizophrenic traits. Or again, you could have somebody with no genetic propensity who has the same amount of environmental triggers and is protected. But if they have lots more, they could still develop schizophrenia. And again, somebody with a genetic propensity towards schizophrenia, if they have less environmental triggers, they may never actually display those schizophrenic traits. So that's the interactionist approach. So it's not is it nature or is it nurture? It's how much is it nature, how much is it nurture, and focusing on how they work together. Okay, and you'll be relieved to hear, although you want to think carefully about the structure here, because you won't go straight in with the problem of twin studies, you'll be relieved to hear that actually the information is the same for nurture as well. So there are arguments to challenge the concept of the nurture side of the debate. Okay, Nistrat, 5 times more likely if you're a first degree relative with OCD, Billet, meta-analysis, apologies, that's so schizophrenia, it should say OCD as well. So OCD, you are 2 times more likely if the concordance rate is 2 times higher for MZ than DZ twins. Why does that go against the nurture debate? There are problems with twin studies. The fact that MZ twins are more identical and therefore might have more shared environments. The fact that twin studies aren't representative. The fact we're making the assumption that twins, both MZ and DZ twins, share 100% of their environment, whereas they might not. They might go to different schools, different lessons, whatever it might be. Bandura supports the idea of nurture. It's all about our environment influencing our behaviour, observing, experiencing vicarious reinforcement and being more likely to behave in a certain way. Niche picking, so it's that gene environment correlation, the two are intertwined together, and again you could use the same examples, intertwined together, so there is no point in pulling trying to tease them apart. It's not possible, they're all combined. So in fact maybe approaches that acknowledge both the nature and the nurture side of the debate, so interactionalist approaches are the best approach. You would not talk about all of those things twice, okay, in a 16 marker. I'll discuss with you the structure and how it works, but you would either do this structure and you'd approach it from challenging the nurture side of the debate, or you do it with this structure, which is the nature side of the debate. Okay, and of course if you can think of evaluation points for Bandura, you can get them in, but link it back to why that is a problem with nurture. Okay.